Hi everyone, Ryan Miles here from Team Battleworld. Just wanted to talk about my 5 favorite decks that I saw from the top 8s of the ARG's state championships that I'd seen all across the country. And basically what I did was I looked at any top 8 lists that got posted, and I went through every single one, and I just kind of picked out which ones I thought had the coolest techs or just like the most interesting choices that I thought were, had a lot of thought behind them. I just kind of wanted to go over them now and talk about what I thought was interesting. So first up, we have Dylan from Maryland, which is the ARG that I played at. He made top 8 with Feasting. That was packing this card right here, Drag the Red Dragon. So obviously everyone knows what Geyser does. He costs 2 less to play for every creature that entered the field this turn. But Drag costs 1 less for each Resonator put into a graveyard from your field this turn. So he synergizes more with sacrificing things for Adam Brawley, sacrificing things for Guinevere. If your board just gets Flame Trapped and you lose 4 guys, you can just play him for 1 red mana. And with the red version of the Feasting deck that we've seen, kind of come up and really take over. Alice World before was green, blue, white, and you had Rulers of Moria, but for the most part, you were green, blue, white, and that was it. But now there's kind of leaning more towards a red variant so that you could get access to the Guinevere, to the Rook Egg. I thought it was really cool to see Drake the Red Dragon put into this deck because it actually does come out for 1 or 2 mana fairly often. And when you're able to, instead of having just the 4 12/12s in the form of Geyser, having also Drakes come out without so other decks have like Titania, and Titania like makes you tap down your guys, so you really need to commit to going wide. And this lets you able to like manage your board to be able to play around things like Interdimensional Escape and Flame Trap, and still have the 12/12 flyer that you want in this kind of deck. And what I also thought was really cool with this thing was the Fairy Tale Library Alexandria. And when this card enters your field, you choose a race, and Resonators you control the chosen race gets Swiftness. So by choosing to go for the Geyser and the Dregs in the same deck, this card can just call Dragon, and suddenly all of your Geysers and Dregs have Swiftness, and you're having Pumpkin Witch flashbacks from the New Frontiers from last format and from Wanderer, where suddenly like Gwybirds are just dropping like boom boom, and they're just hitting you in the face for 12 like the turn they enter the field. And it's a lot more difficult to remove Gwybirds the turn they enter their field, than when you actually have a turn to mess around with them. So those were like the cool things that I thought that this deck really did that nobody else was doing. There were some interesting choices I saw here. He's got the 4 Sacred Elves and the 3 Red Riding Hoods. I didn't think the Red Riding Hood was particularly necessary in this kind of list. It's just like ramps your stones, but it's not really like it's 2 green mana, and it forced his mana base to be super green, as you can see. Like he's got 4 Blasting Waves and 2 Gusting Skies. And I think that you really want to be hitting your Guinevere's on turn 1 more than you want to be hitting, Tama and Sacred Elf on turn 1. It's neat because you can energize into Sacred Elf, and when you are able to energize into, either the Sacred Elf or the Tama, you're able to, if you call a white, like let's say you go first, or let's say you go second, turn 1 you can go Regalia, energize for a green 1-drop, and then use your white mana to play a Geyser as soon as turn 1. So that's kind of why the Sacred Elf is in there. It lets you get your 12/12s down faster, but I don't really think it was necessary, and the Red Riding Hoods also kind of just clunk it up a little bit. But overall, with the Dregs and the Library Alexandrias, that's what really stood out to me in this list and made it really interesting. Next up, we have Joseph Bleen from New Jersey's ARG. And he was playing a 0, 6 Age of Light deck. And one of the things I immediately saw with this list that I was like, oh, this is this is what all the other 0 lists have been missing, was this card, Justice of Godsword. So when a Resonator your opponent controls attacks or blocks, this card deals 500 damage to target attacking or blocking Resonator. Okay, but if you control the J ruler, so 0, this card deals damage equal to its attack instead. So as long as you are flipping into your 0 early enough, this is a 1 mana deal 1100 damage to target attacking or blocking J Resonator. And 11 is unfortunately right below where you need to be for the Geysers and the Dregs and the Titanias. But because he plays 4 of the Excalibur, the Godsword, he's pretty easily able to get to 13. So 13 is exactly what you want, because then you are killing the Geysers and the Drakes and the Titanias for 1 mana. And it's interesting to me that he chose to use Excalibur of the Godsword instead of using, a Death Scythe or Horn of the Phantom Beast, or Horn of the Sacred Beast, sorry. But I can kind of understand it. It's another imperishable outlet, and this deck is pretty much completely focused, on bringing out the zero as soon as possible. So having more imperishable is definitely a good thing. And also discards for white, which allows him to, have an Excalibur on the field and then pitch an Excalibur from his hand to ramp, more into a Percival or a Zero's Familiar, or even, the Justice of the Godsword that we were just talking about. So it's definitely a pretty cool tech there. And I can understand why he went for this instead of the other ones, but I would like to, have seen like more of a mix if I was building it myself. Another cool tech that I saw here was the Zero's Familiar. A lot of the Zero decks are more control based, and they aren't playing this card. And like in a vacuum, I don't think this card is very good. It's like an 8/8 flyer for 2 mana, which is not really comparable to a 12/12 flyer for 1 mana, but it does give your J Ruler barrier, which means they can't Moonbeam it, they can't Space Time Anomaly it, they can't mess with Zero at all whatsoever. And I guess the issue is that it's really easily removable. So it's not hard for, say, a Mikage deck to just like kill Zero's Familiar and then go and just kill the J Ruler immediately after. But what I did find interesting was the last drop, and it's just a one of, so he's got the life gain against the aggro decks, but he's also got the ability to just immediately bring back a Zero's Familiar at a moment's notice at instant speed, which I feel like can really catch a lot of people off guard. You go to target the Zero with the Space-Time Anomaly and try, burn it down for as much mana as whatever, it is you're doing, and suddenly a Zero's Familiar comes back into the field, and Zero's untargetable until you kill the 8/8, and that can really disrupt a lot of strategies, and I thought that was kind of cute. Overall, this deck, 4 Percival, he's really digging for the Regalia, he's got 10 Regalia, he's got the 4 Zero's Magic Light, and the 4 Justice of Godsword, and I think that's what's really important here, is when you have the 4 Zero's Magic Light and the 4 Justice of Godsword, you have 8 ways to kill literally any Resonator, pretty much, for 1 mana. And that's really what you need to be doing when the Featsing Turbo decks are playing Guibers and Titanius for 1 mana. So you need to be able to answer that and keep up tempo, and the fact that you also have to bring out your own 11/11 guy that takes away their flying and stuff, that's really, really good. And the Percival just kind of synergize with that as well. Once you strip away the Guibers and stuff's flying, you're able to block them with Percivals, and that's just another way to stop that kind of aggression. He's got 4 Seal of Wind and Light, 3 Wall of Wind. He's got the Dreams of Flight to try and give his own J Ruler that extra bit of reach, give him flying. And the Seals and Wall of Winds just really disrupt the decks that want to go aggressive early, and just like punishes them for trying to play on curve. Interdimensional Escape lets them, clear out all those tiny guys that the Featsing Turbo decks are playing, and also kind of hedge against stealth a little bit. And he just kind of got, an answer to deal with both aggro decks, the Featsing Turbo, and the stealth decks, without also trying to be a control deck like most of the Zero lists were. So I thought this was a very unique list, and I thought it had a lot of really good ideas thrown into it, and that's why I put it on this list. So next up, we have David Molina from Florida, also playing a Featsing deck. And what I thought was interesting about this list was 2 things. First off, the Monkey Trapped in Life. When this card goes to the graveyard, return it to your hand, you lose 100 life. So one of the core issues of the Featsing Turbo deck is that it can run out of steam. It runs out of cards. Obviously, you have the Guinevere's, you have so many floaters and draw potential with like Tama, Messenger Familiar, Adam Raleigh, all that stuff. But any control deck, their whole game plan is just run you out of cards, run you out of cards, run you out of cards. So once you run out of cards, you're not able to keep torrenting and generating elves, but the Monkey Trapped in Life lets you always have a 1-drop to be able to play to trigger your torrents. And it's just a one of, it's not any like core strategy, but it's a cute little tech that makes sure that he's always able to keep torrenting, keep producing tokens, keep producing cards. And if he's got this with Guinevere, he's just constantly drawing and drawing and drawing. And obviously with the black, being a black Resonator, he's always got an answer to Tree with Adam Brawley. So if he's ever able to bring Tree down to 100 health, he can just sack the Monkey Trapped in Life and another Resonator for the Adam Brawley to deal the extra 400. And usually when you're playing the Featsing deck and you have the Messenger Familiars only, they tend to get put in the graveyard very quickly just because you're looking for the Adam Brawleys and the Titanias to bring out your 12/12s. So the Monkey Trapped in Life just kind of is more reliable, I guess. You know, once you draw it, you're going to have it for the rest of the game, unless they, you know, Zero's Magic Light it, or while it's in your hand, they Lapis Storm it or something, you know. So it's very reliable, and I thought it was a pretty excellent idea to throw in this kind of list. And obviously the second choice here is the Volga, true successor of Certo Volga. And the cool trick with this is you play this, and then you play Keeper of the Past Earther, which is the 8/8 that deals damage to a Resonator by removing 2 cards from your graveyard, and then you deal damage equal to the 2 cards converted mana cost times 200. And with Titanias and Guibers in this deck, you can very easily get over 2,000 damage done to a Resonator by summoning Earther, and Volga just converts that damage into your opponent's face. So in those kind of matchups where they start, you know, removing your Guibers and your Titanias on site, and you can't really push that much damage through, this combo just lets you annihilate their face. And my friend Jimmy Osborne actually played this in the Maryland states, but he had only side decked it. I thought it was really neat that David decided to main deck this. Otherwise, it's a pretty standard list. You know, 4 Gwen, 4 Rook Egg, 4 Tama, 3 Messenger. I think it's a little low on the 12/12s because it's only got the 4 Guiber and the 2 Titania. Typically, you'll see 7 or even 8 total, whether you're going Guibers, Drakes, Titania, whatever. But he definitely felt he needed Barrier Shadows in the main on top of like these other cute tech cards. So depending on his meta, yeah, it could have been the correct call. But overall, I was very happy with looking at this list and seeing these choices. And I think he was first seed after Swiss in this event, and honestly, I'm not surprised. Like, this is a very teched out and potent facing variant. So next up, we have Geyser March from Arizona, and I have some things to say about this list, that's for sure. So it's 45 cards, which I don't like. It's Tree, which I didn't like until I started looking at some of the tree lists around here. But he does have a lot of really cool things going on that I wanted to highlight, and a lot of really not good things going on that I felt I needed to talk about also. So first up, we got Flak Jacket. Prevent all damage that would be dealt to Edge Resonator. So you put this on Alice, the tree avatar, and suddenly you just basically can't lose the game. Any damage that they would deal to you gets redirected to Alice, and any damage that Alice would take just doesn't happen. So they need to find a way to answer the Alice and then also kill you after the fact. So this is just like a cute little trick that that you can put on an Alice, and you know, you just don't die until you like remove it or kill the Alice, or you know, you just can't. The way that the Feasting deck kills you, right, is they just fly over your Alice and hit you, and then Alice dies, and then they kill you, like they hit you, right? So they just brute force through the Alice. They don't actually interact with it. So this kind of prevents that strategy. Next up, we have Twofold Chant. So he's packing 4 copies of Seal of Wind and Light and 4 copies of Twofold Chant. So once he starts, you know, ramping up and getting into that mid game, he really doesn't want any detrimental spells affecting his board state. I think that's a pretty cool idea. Most of the other tree lists were only packing, you know, the 4 seals, maybe. Some of the trees were playing stealth, and they weren't playing any counter spells, which I think is super weak. So by playing the Seal of the Wind and Light and the Twofold Chant, I think he's almost overdoing it. But at the same time, you can't really be too safe when your win con is lose, like when your win con is go to 0 and practically lose the game, and then you're putting Flak Jackets and Protection of Seraph on your Alice. You really need to make sure that's doing anything. So I think the Twofold Chant is really cool. I would have liked to see it with more instant speed stuff. Really, the only other instant speed things that he has to like be an activator for the torrent for this card are the Prison and the Lunar Lakes, the Seals, more Twofold Chants, Interdimensional Escapes, and Ancient Knowledge, which is a good, you know, healthy 15 cards, but they're not all things that you want to cast just to activate a Twofold Chant. Like, the best case scenario that he's just like, well, I really need to torrent this Twofold Chant, but I don't want to waste a card, is he goes Ancient Knowledge, you know, reveal 5, draw 2, and then he Twofold Chants. But that's 6 mana. That's pretty late in the game to be doing that kind of thing. I mean, it's definitely viable, and it really locks down, like, anytime he can get to, like, 6 to 10 stones in a game, like, he's probably going to win, right? That's what I got from this list. I think the hard part is getting there, but, you know, with Tree, innately is able to just, like, stall out games longer than most people can. So I thought the twofold chant kind of made sense. I mean, there's really nothing wrong with, like, turn 2 twofold chant and you know, have it be a wall of wind, because the Featsing Turbo decks and the Charlotte aggro decks, they want to be playing on curve. So I thought it was really cool that he went for the 8 counterspell route. The next cool card I thought I saw was Lumia, and this is just like a really interesting tree tech in general. Basically, you're playing the long game, they proc your tree, you're at 100 life, you know, you're biting the bullet. As soon as your Alice dies, you die, basically. And you're just kind of afraid that they might, you know, play an Atom Brawly over a black Resonator, or they might Soul Hunt your Alice or something like that. And Lumia just brings you back to 4,000. So you proc your tree, you go to 100 life, you get out an Alice, you get an Excalibur X, and then suddenly you're back at 4,000 life. And this does cost 10 mana, but you can play the other side for like 3 mana and then shift it for like 6 mana. So you can like do it over the course of a couple turns. You don't need to just like one-shot 10 mana this card. But it is really neat with Tree, and I did like the 1-up tech in there. And just, I mean, this deck is kind of over the place. So like this card would be pretty weak to like a black discard package, essentially. You know, they can just scorn it out of your hand, or they can like Lapis Storm it and make you have 0 cards. But he's packing 3 Hydronomica, so he's able to really search whatever card he needs at a moment's notice, which I thought was really cool. He's got the Tamas in here. The Tamas, I think, help him interact with Feasting and slow them down. So the Feasting decks, the way they get out their Gwybers on the really early turns is they play a 1-drop, they play a Regalia, their Feasting Torrent triggers, and then they get a 1/1 elf. And the Tama, you know, filters, draws a card when he plays it, so he's never like actually losing advantage. But it's also able to sacrifice itself to ping off tokens after they resolve, while the other card that the Feasting player is playing is on the chase. And then it removes the ability for the Feasting deck to play Gwybers on the early turns. So I think that's a really important piece of the deck. I didn't really understand the Red Riding Hood. I guess he just wants to be getting more stones out because he knows he's going to be playing that late game. And the Riding Hood's pretty good in the late game as well once you start having 5 or 7 stones, which this deck clearly wants to be doing because it's playing for the long game. Prison in the Lunar Lake, you see for the stealth matchup, I assume. 3 Interdimensional Escape, and that can be both for Feasting Turbo and for the stealth matchup. This card, Refrain, I skipped over it, sorry. So this destroys all additions, Regalia, Resonators, and J Rulers, so it's just a huge, you know, mana sink board wipe, kind of just kill everything. And I don't really like it in this deck that much. I think there are just better options for board wiping. I don't think you want to be killing your own Excaliburs, Alice, and stuff like that. And I think I mean, I guess he really wants to activate this before he ever gets his Alice procced. But I think with the mana cost on this card and just how much mana you need to sink into it, that's just too greedy. Arthur Pendragon as a 2-of, like it's also another board wipe. So you have Reflect, Refrain, End of Ages, you have Interdimensional Escape, and you have Arthur Pendragon. Like all these cards are just about wiping, you know, a Feasting or a stealth board. And I just feel like that's way too much. And you could probably cut it down, especially if you cut down to 40 cards and stop playing 45 cards. But you know, they're all nice options. And again, like I feel like you could really easily go down to 40 cards because you're playing the Hydronomica. You can see these options when you need them. And I think if I were to like build this list for myself, I would try to make aggressive cuts down to 40 cards, and at the same time go up to 8 Regalia. Probably play, you know, just add 4 Artemis Bow, and that would enable you to play Charlotte's Water Transformation Magic. And again, this is like, you're really cutting like a lot of cards here. Like I would cut Reflect Refrain, I would cut 1 Flak Jacket, I would cut 1 Protection of Seraph, I would cut 1 or 2 Twofold Chant, I would cut the Red Riding Hoods, I would cut 1 Prison in Lunar Lake, I would cut 1 Ancient Knowledge, cut 1 Arthur, cut 1 Captain Hook, that kind of stuff. Like I'd make a bunch of cuts and probably still not have enough room. But if you play Charlotte's Water Transformation Magic, it's an activator for Twofold Chant that you can pretty much use whenever. And then Charlotte's Water Transformation Magic plus Artemis Bow lets you really deal with anything, any Resonator-based deck you can deal with on turn 1, turn 2, turn 3, so you can stall out to see your tree stuff start getting live. But I mean, he just went for 45 cards, massive amounts of board clear. I don't know why he made these choices, but that's what he did. And then the one Captain Hook just kind of feels random as hell. I don't really understand why it's there, but okay. I guess he wants to... Actually, I have no idea what he wants to do. He's just playing one Captain Hook. And then he's got 3 copies of Excalibur, 3 copies of Alice. And that seems great because his win condition is pretty much flip Alice, put the Flak Jacket and Protection of Seraph on it, and just kill him. I didn't really like his stone base that much. I feel like Rulers of Moria would have been a lot better, especially because he's playing Lumia. His only way to flip Lumia is with this 1 green-red stone. I mean, obviously he's probably just playing it for 10 mana or, you know, shifting it, whatever, but he still needs a red source, so it's not bad, I guess. But lots of good things going on here, and then some other stuff. But I thought it was interesting nonetheless. And last up we have Andrew Kiani, also from Maryland. And this is the only guy I included the sideboard with because I think the sideboard was the most relevant here. It's basically just Sylvia aggro. What I thought was cool in the main board was the 4 copies of Flame King Shout. You really get to clear out all of Featsing Turbo's, you know, little dorks that are chilling. It kills the Guinevere's, kills the Rookics, kills the Scouters, kills the Thomas, kills the tokens, whatever. You know, it just leaves them with their Wyvers, basically, and their Titanias, and their Adam Brawleys, kind of. I'll get to that later. So it's just a really fun card to be running 4 copies of in this meta. He's got the 4 Elvish or 4 Sacred Elf, and he's kind of able to play this card on turn 2 if he really wants to. I feel like the Sacred Elf is more for playing Prissy on turn 2, that kind of stuff. But I think one of the primary reasons he ran 4 copies of this was partially because of Featsing, and partially because he's playing an additional 4 copies of Flame Dragon of Altea. And if you watched my Lapse Cluster card discussion videos, I talked about how I really don't think this card is good in any capacity. It's just kind of cheesy, but what it does do in this Featsing Turbo meta is it allows for you to contest the air with your own 12/12s. What I mean by that is like the Featsing Turbo deck, which is what is the expected meta, is playing Wybers and Titanias, etc. And you get to Flame King Shout away all of their little guys and then bring in your own 12/12. And now, like, the only removal that a Featsing deck typically has for a 12/12 flyer is to run their own 12/12 flyer into it. So by being able to do that, you know, you're able to stall out the game a little bit more. Like most red decks, like what else would Sylvia be able to do to a Gwyber on turn 3? You know what I mean? They don't, like, they could Flame Sprite Demon Flame it, and then you're just playing a lot of really weak, low-cost cards that aren't very aggressive. And yeah, you're beating the Feasting matchup, but you're not rushing down the control matchups fast enough. And, you know, Flame King Shout into a 12/12 on turn 3 is pretty aggressive for a control deck to deal with. Obviously, he's also got the Prisia's Pursuit of Flame in here. And he's also got Last Drops. So the Last Drop, I've already put a picture for it, I'm not going to do it again. Last Drop lets you bring back this card for 2 mana at instant speed, which, you know, just kind of comes out of nowhere sometimes. It's pretty cool. And that is something that I thought was very interesting, that he chose to go for, you know, 4 Flame King Shout and 4 Flame Dragon of Altea. But what is even more interesting is looking at his sideboard, you've got a completely different deck post-board. So obviously, Flame King Shout, Flame Dragon of Altea, like they talked about, the meta, for a control deck to be able to exist in this metagame, right, it has to be able to deal with 12/12 flyers consistently, because it has to be Feasting. So it's not super good to be playing that card, to be playing the Flame Dragon in the main board. So control decks see a Sylvia aggro, and they go, oh man, I have to, you know, side on all my creature hate, side on my J-Ruler hate, and then I'll be able to win game 2. And Andrew just goes complete 180, just sides out, you know, probably the Elvish, the Sacred Elves, sides out Earthers maybe not all of them, I don't know, probably sides out Flame King Shout against control, and he just goes into the Mars package. So he goes 4 Blood Boil, 4 Demon of Namblot, whatever that is called, 3 Invitation of Disaster. Like, he just, turn 1, oh, your control deck, turn 1 Thunder you, turn 2 Blood Boil you, turn 3 Thunder Blood, turn 3 Prisia, hit you for 7. Okay, lay within sack Prisia, you take 5. And then all of a sudden you're under 2,000 life, and then he's flipping and removing a Namblot from his hand and doming you for 2,000 with Invitation of Disaster, and you lose the game. I think it's really risky to keep Nameless Mist. Like if you're playing a black control deck, right, like the Mikage lists, it's really risky to keep in Nameless Mists against a Sylvia aggro deck. So if you don't see this swap coming into, you know, suddenly a spell-based aggro list, and I mean, you look at his stones too, right? His stones are 4 red, green, and 6 red. So there's no Ruler's Memoria. There's no blue for Cheshire Cat, so you don't really expect a Charlotte sideboard. And Charlotte is typically more spell-based than a Sylvia aggro because it can refill its hand, so it is playing the Thunders, the Blood Boils, etc. So the stone base makes it even more misleading that this deck is going to sideboard into, you know, burn spell deck. And I think that's a really, like, we've seen sideboard switcheroos in Forcible in the past, but what really makes this one super effective to me is the fact that it goes from one game plan of this like creature aggro, and suddenly it's just spell aggro. And like the ways that you beat those two different deck types, if you're a control deck, are very, very different. So it really throws off the control deck sideboarding against you, and that's why I thought that this deck was really, really cool. So yeah, that's it for the 5 decks that I thought were really cool. That was, one more time, Dylan Thompson from New Jersey playing Feasting with Dregs. Then we've got Joseph Bleen from New Jersey playing Zero with Justice of God. Oops. I messed up. With Justice of Godsword and Excaliburs. Then we have David Molina from Florida with the Monkey Trapped in Life and the main board Volga combo. Then we have Geyser March from Arizona playing God knows what, some Flak Jacket, some Twofold Chant, some Lumia, some like a little bit of everything all over the place, but pretty cool deck nonetheless. And then last but not least, we have Andrew Kiani with the Sylvia sideboard and Mars. So thanks for watching, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the video, and until next time, thank you very much.